Barakatuh. So let's get settled down, inshallah. We're probably going to be finishing early today, so you can continue your talks later, inshallah. Alright. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So some cures for miserliness and for greed. Number one is to be moderate. Be moderate in your living and be moderate in your spending. So the more one spends, the less likely they are, the less likely they're going to be able to arrive at contentment. Because when you spend so much and you get so accustomed to spending a lot of things, then you don't get as content. Because you always want to have the newest this, the newest that, the latest this, and all of these things. And now it's more difficult to please you. So you learn to be happy with one certain kind of food. You learn to be happy with a certain type of clothing that you have, whatever it may be. And when you get an opportunity to indulge in a luxury, you can do that. But you have to make sure that you're at a point where if it's taken away from you, you can go ahead and survive normally. There was one politician, you can guess who it was. He said that we came from an environment where we used to ride horses and we used to ride camels. And now we've discovered oil. We're exporting all of this oil and everything. And he says, if you take this oil away from us, we're going to be very happy going back to living in tents and riding horses and riding camels. But you people, you can't live without oil. We'll be fine, you're the one who's going to have a problem. Who said that statement? Not the foreign secretary, someone, King Faisal. Right? King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. The point was a very good point. The point was that there's one group of people in the world that are addicted to this and they cannot survive. They will not be able to live if this is taken away from them. And he says, we just came recently. They were a little bit late, right? We recently just got some oil. If we go back, we're going to survive just as fine. We can live without it. And we enjoy it, but we can live without it. And that's the point. That's the goal in which you should reach. You can enjoy it. You can buy the phone, you can have the thing, you can wear nice clothes and all of that, but you need to make sure in your heart that these things are not controlling your heart. That if they're taken away, you're going to be fine. They're taken away if you're CK and you're Calvin Klein or whatever your brands that you're wearing, whatever. If they're taken away, you can walk into your local Target or something like that, and you can buy the $5 shirt, and you're not going to complain because you still have a shirt on your body, and you're going to say, Alhamdulillah, I have clothes. It's going to work. They're still nice. You're still going to be fine. That's the level at which you need to be. You can go and enjoy like a decent meal or something like that. When you walk out and say, you know what, I can't afford Maz anymore, or I can't afford that Persian dish anymore. So you know what, I'm very happy with my bread and water or dates or whatever that I'm eating at home. Very happy with my cereal that I'm eating. It's perfectly fine with me. When you get to that level, you know you're at a safe level. If you cannot be at that level, then you need to start being more and more moderate in your living and spending so your heart gets to that level. This is number one. Number two, suffice on what you need, right? And don't preoccupy yourself with things beyond that, especially when you don't have time. So people are often thinking that, if you had the opportunity and you want all these luxuries, you could just keep on working. You can work 100 hours a week. You can work 120 hours a week. You can work, 130 hours a week and sleep a little bit less. Right? Because if you wanted more and more and more of this world, you could go ahead and keep doing something like that. But if you're satisfied with what you've been given, and you're happy with what you've been given, you're going to be more content with even the things that you have already. So be content with that. And suffice on the things that you need. And if you get the other things, alhamdulillah. And if you don't get them, alhamdulillah. Number three, remember the honor of being free from needs. Think about the fact that when you're free from needs, right? There's an honor in that. And there's a humiliation when you're addicted to these things. There's a humiliation when you're relying on, having all of these things and you have to have them in your life, otherwise you're not able to function. There's a sense of freedom that arises from not being addicted and not being a slave to these things. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith about something about a person who's addicted to the gold and silver, the dinar and the dirham. What did he say? Who is from the hadith class? prophetic wisdom class.
Person who is addicted to the wealth, he will not be happy if it's taken away from him.
Exactly. He will not be happy if it's taken away from him. He's happy, a little bit more specific. Who remembers that hadith? Which means what? He'll be ruined. The person who's a slave to gold and silver will be ruined. How will he be ruined? Yes. What's the second part of it? What's the second part of it? You got the first part. What's the second part? I saw a lot of 99%, 95%, 97% on the final. So we should remember this. Yeah. If you give him, then he's not satisfied? He's happy. Yeah, if you give him, he's satisfied. If you don't give him, then he's upset. So anytime he gets something, he's going to be content, quiet, very happy, everything is going great. When he doesn't get it, he's miserable. He can't take it anymore. Because he's become a slave to this gold and silver. So this is the same thing. Remember that honor comes in being free. That you know what, you're going to be content, your mind is going to be at ease. Whether you get or whether you don't get, you're still comfortable. You're not going to start going crazy or something like that. So that's why you need to be very careful. And remember that the honor of being free from these things is very important. Number 4, reflect on the people who possess a lot of wealth. Think about people who own a lot of wealth or who have owned a lot of wealth throughout history. Who can name some people who had a lot of, just massive amounts of wealth? Qarun, exactly. Who else? Iskandar. Who else? Huh? Fir'aun, Pharaoh. Yes. These kind of people, right? So think about all these people who had all this wealth, okay? And then think about the best people who have ever been created. The prophets. Think about what kind of life they had lived, right? Now ask yourself, which person do you really want to be like? Right? Who's your real role model in life? And then think about, why am I taking Fir'aun and these other people as my role model? Why do I crave what they have rather than trying to follow in the footsteps of the other prophets? This is what you should want to actually have. Who do you really want to be like? And lastly, reflect on the dangers of wealth, which we've already mentioned. Reflect on those harms that can be there, and that will be an example of some cures that you can find for yourself in terms of being addicted to wealth. There's one part which we're going to skip in this, which is responsibilities of wealth. We're going to skip that. We're going to conclude with some stories of generous people. And these are some nice stories that we find. Some are from the time of the companions, and some are just stories which people have come up with, but they're motivating. So one time a guest came to the Messenger of Allah. So imagine the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, someone is coming to him and asking him for something. And the Messenger of Allah says, I don't have anything. He didn't have literally anything to give him. So there was a man who was there, one of the Ansar from Medina. He was one of the Ansar, one of the helpers. He came and he took the guest to his house. He said, don't worry, Messenger of Allah, you don't have anything. I'm going to show hospitality to this person who is in need of some food. So he took him to his house and he put some food in front of him, and he told his wife to turn off the lantern that they use. So the light is off. He said, sorry, our light went off. Electricity went out, whatever it may be, right? And they're eating. So he used to go, and while this man is eating, he's going and putting his hand out towards the plate, and he's going like this, and the man is eating, and the man is eating and everything, until the man had eaten, until he was completely full. He actually did not eat any food. He did not actually eat anything until the man was completely done, because he did not have enough food. He did not have enough food to even feed that person. So what happened was, after this was done, in the morning, the Messenger of Allah received a revelation from Angel Jibreel about a man who had asked him, about this man basically. So he went to the man and he asked him, he said, you know what did you do last night with this guest? You did something, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved this action so much. Whatever you did, I want to know exactly what you did. You did something amazing, but he didn't know the details of what he had done. And the man explained to him, this is exactly what I did. I took this man home, I didn't even have enough food. I was pretending to eat so he doesn't feel bad. Can you imagine? Pretending to eat so that the man doesn't feel bad and he thinks that you're eating. So this is one example of, permissible, lying in a sense, right? And this man got to eat completely because he was starving and he was hungry. So then the verse of the Quran was revealed on this occasion, which says, they give to others in preference over themselves, even though they were in need. This is exactly what they were doing. And this is a scenario describing the Ansar, the helpers living in Medina. They were helping the Muhajirun, the ones who had migrated from Mecca into Medina. So this is an example. Now, this is something to measure yourself with. Can you really imagine that if you were in a situation where you didn't have much food in your own house, and somebody came to you asking, would you be able to do something like this? If you consider yourself to be generous, and you read this story, think about how generous you really are. You don't really fit the description of generosity, probably, if you're not really willing to do something like this. Number 2, Aisha radiallahu anha, may Allah be pleased with her, she was given 180,000 dirhams. Okay, why would she be given this? Because this was during the time of the Khalifa, when there were a lot of expeditions, a lot of money was coming into the Muslim empire. So a lot of the companions were given different rations in terms of wealth because of their status. So she was given 180,000 dirhams. That's a lot of wealth. So what happened? She took a little cup, like a basin. She filled all of this. She kept on filling it. And she started distributing it to the poor. Anyone who would come, everyone who was poor was coming in. She was distributing all of this wealth. And then afterwards what happened was that she had, one of her servants was going to bring her dinner. So she said, okay, you know what? It's dinner time now. Bring my dinner. So what did she bring? She brought some bread and she brought some oil. So her name was Durra. So basically she was someone who was helping Aisha, because Aisha was older at that time. And then she says, didn't you keep at least 1 dirham from all that money that you had so that we could buy some meat for dinner? And Aisha responded, if you reminded me, then I would have kept 1. Not that I wouldn't have kept 1. If you reminded me. But I was so busy giving away all this wealth, I completely forgot about myself. That is preferring other people over. It's not that she says, no, we would not eat meat. No. We didn't have the wealth, but I was so busy trying to give all of this away, I completely forgot that we have to focus on our own dinner as well. That's what you call generosity. Another example. Abdullah ibn Ja'far, he entered a garden and he saw a slave working in the garden. So this hungry dog came along and he's watching from far away. A hungry dog came and he took some of his food and he threw a piece of food. The dog ate the entire piece. So he took another piece and he threw the food. The dog ate the entire thing again. So he kept on throwing pieces of food. The dog ate everything. So then he saw that this man is a slave working inside of a garden. This is the meal that he gets. So he went up to the slave and he said, you know what? How much food do you actually get every day? He said, I saw you from far away, you were watching. You saw all the food that was in my plate. That was everything. That's all the food that I get. So then the man is thinking, this is a very noble man. This is an honorable man who's asking the question. So he says, why did you give preference to this dog over yourself? You could have eaten some of the food, you could have given the dog a little bit. You don't have to give the dog everything. So the slave explained, he said, look, there's no dogs living in this area. This area does not have any dogs around it. So which means that this dog had come from a very far distance. And he must have been very, very hungry. He didn't have anything to eat for a very long time. So I felt really bad that I'm going to be eating, and this dog is around me, and I'm leaving the dog to not eat anything, leaving the dog hungry. So then Abdullah asked him, he said, how are you going to work? This is inquiring. How are you going to work? You have to work in the garden. You have to pick the fruits. You have to do all of these things. It's hard labor. How are you going to work if you didn't eat a meal? You've gone without a meal. So the man responded and he said, I can withstand the hunger. I can take it. Don't worry. I have enough food from that I ate before. I'll be okay. So then Abdullah started thinking to himself. When you hear a story like this, right? Think about it. You say, oh, that's a nice story. MashaAllah, may Allah reward that slave. And alhamdulillah, let's go back to our business. What did this man do? This is a very good point. Abdullah ibn Ja'far started thinking to himself. And he said, people tell me that I'm a generous man. He was a well-known man. And people say, oh, he's a very generous man. He's a good man. He's a good reputation. So he's thinking to himself now, he said, people describe me as being generous. Look at this. This guy's a slave. He said, this slave is more generous than I am, and he has nothing compared to what I have. So then he decided, it's time to fix it right now. Rather than just, this is not depression. This is not going home and saying, you know what, I feel so bad because I'm not a generous person, and you get depressed for a while, and then you say, you know, let me go eat something so I feel better, let me go watch a movie so I'm feeling better about myself, and then we forget about the whole thing. That's what a lot of people would do. He said, no, it's time to take action right now. Let's fix this right now. So what did he do? He went to the owner of the garden, and he said, how much does garden cost? He said, you want to buy it? He said, yeah, I want to buy it. So he bought the entire garden on the spot. He bought the slave. He freed the slave, and he gave the garden to the slave. He said, this is a gift for you. You handle the garden. So he's trying to readjust, and he got motivated by an act of generosity that he saw somebody else doing. The act of generosity was coming from where? From someone who had almost nothing in his possession, and that motivated him. Oftentimes we look at, the generous acts of really wealthy people or something like that, and say, wow, he gave so much, let me give a small portion. When you see someone who has nothing and they give something, that's a real motivation. That's a real motivating factor. So that's another story. Last story about generosity is one of the scholars, Bishr ibn al-Harith. Bishr ibn al-Harith was a very generous person, and he was on his deathbed. The man is literally dying. He's breathing his last moments. So some man came to him complaining, I'm poor, I need food, I need clothing, I need this and that. Bishr had almost no wealth left. He was a very, very poor man, and he's dying. So what did he do? He took off his shirt, and he gave it to the man. He said, here, take this shirt. And then he borrowed somebody else's shirt, and he died in that shirt that was borrowed. He said, when I'm dead, I'm dead. You can take the shirt off me, and you can take it back. You're going to get it back very soon. This is what you call generosity. You're in need, right? You're directly in need, and you decide you still want to give it to this person. That's what you call levels of generosity. So measure yourself. Now there's some stories of miserly people. There's an entire book actually. It's written by one of the scholars known as Al-Jahiz, one of the very early scholars. It's called Kitab al-Bukhala. Anyone read this? You heard of it? So yeah, some of you have heard of it. I think it's been translated. It's been translated into English, and it's a very good translation actually. The translation is by this project on translating great books from Islamic civilization. So they've translated the Sirah of Ibn Kathir, they've translated books on mathematics, they've translated books on finance, and they translated this book as an example of good literature, Kitab al-Bukhala. So they have a lot of stories of like misers and all of that. Some of them are really fun. I really recommend that you read them because they serve a good moral story. And at the same time, they're actually very entertaining. So I'm just going to give you one story, one story about a miserly person, which is interesting, and then we'll stop. So in Basra, and these are real stories that have been documented by people. In Basra, where is Basra? Iraq. In Basra, there was a really wealthy man. So one day, one of his neighbors invited him for a meal of eggs mixed with butter. Now there was a special kind of meal where if you mix butter and eggs and this other spices and all of that, it's like it's like the chicken tikka masala nihari of like the Desi community. It's like the maqluba of the Arabic community. People are just waiting to get invited to one of those meals, right? Like it's the good stuff that you don't get all the time. So this is a wealthy guy. This is a rich guy, and his neighbor invites him. He says, I want you to partake in this, nice meal with me. So the man started, he joined. He started eating and eating and eating. He ate so much. And then after he was eating so much, he started drinking a lot of water, started drinking other stuff. The man became so sick. He became so ill by eating so much of this food that they had to call the doctor. So the doctor comes and checks. He said, man, this guy is so messed up. This guy's almost dying. He ate so much that literally he's almost dying. So he said, doctor, what should I do? What is the medicine prescribed for me? He says, you need to, first, before we give you medicine, you need to go in and vomit up this food. The man said, you want me to vomit up eggs with butter? I'd rather die than vomit that up. It's like, can you imagine someone saying, that Kubi day? You want me to vomit up Kubi day? Yeah, right, man. Forget it. Get out of here. You can go. this is what you call stinginess, miserliness. So there's a lot of these stories. The more I don't want to get into all these stories. I gave you the fig one as well. There's a lot of these stories that are very interesting, and the more the principle that it gives you is look at the people who are generous, and whenever you see their generosity, think about how you're measuring up yourself, and look at the people who are miserly. And when you see an act of miserliness there, obviously advise them, but think about that and say, how ridiculous that is. I hope I'm never going to be described as being in that category, because that person is really despicable in the sight of the people as well as in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So hopefully, we'll conclude with this, ending early today. Are there any, now we have time for questions. Are there any questions or anything, even the previous classes? You didn't get a chance to ask the questions. Al-Jahil. Jahil. Jahiz. We didn't have it. It's in hadith. It's in it's in hadith. It's in Bukhari and Muslim. Bukhari and Muslim. Yes.
Is that the one where one of the fathers of the kids is saved?
No, that's a different story. That's also in Bukhari. It's also in Bukhari, but it's a different story.
What is the title of the book?
The Book of Misers. Book of Misers, yeah. If I remember, it's been translated. If I remember correctly, I think it's been translated. Yeah.
Towards the beginning, under explanation of harm to man.
Important to check yourself and say, okay, am I doing these kind of things, or am I, failing in this thing? So when we look at the causes of miserliness, we'll see a little bit more detail in terms of how this actually plays out. Okay? 12 o'clock. Does anyone need a break right now? We don't need a break, right? Okay, let's continue. So, causes of miserliness. So, the underlying root cause of why people become miserly is that they love those desires that you can attain through wealth. It's not the wealth always that they love, but it's the desires, the ability to do certain things. Those things that you can get from your wealth is what people love, what people want. So what does this result from? There are certain things that result. Let's focus on the desires. So the first thing is loving desires that you can only attain through wealth. So if you think about it from this perspective, if you knew that you were going to die the next day, you knew for sure that by tomorrow you're going to die, right? You would not withhold your wealth. Right? You would not hold on to all of the wealth and all of the money that you have. You'd be more likely to go and spend it. But the thing is this, so what is the underlying cause of this? The underlying root of the problem is what then? No, I'm saying, so now that we understand that if you were going to spend more, if you knew you would die tomorrow, but if you didn't know that, you're not willing to spend more, what is the underlying root of the problem? Not just hubb ad-dunya, not just love for, there's something above and it's something more detailed. Yeah, the hope. The hope of living long. Right? The hope of living long. So then, if you still aren't going to spend it, and you say, no, you know what, I'm still not going to spend it, I'm still going to keep it for my family, because my family needs it, right? And they need to survive and all of that, then what is the underlying cause again? Now what's the underlying cause? The underlying, okay, the question is, if you knew you were going to die tomorrow, and you still said, I'm still not going to spend my wealth. I still need to save it so I can save it for my family. Right? I'm not saying there's a wrong thing. I'm just trying to focus on this aspect. You're saying, I'm going to save it for my family. Right? And therefore you withhold and you're not willing to spend again. What is the underlying cause of this?
Love of money.
No, not love of money. It's more than that. The back. That's true, but I'm just looking for something a little bit more in detail. Exactly. It's the hope that they will live. And how do you know that they're going to live? Exactly. So one of the causes that people have is the hope or the expectation that they're going to live long enough to be able to benefit from this wealth. And that's not there in the first place. There's no guarantee of that. It doesn't mean that you don't save up. It means that if you zoom in, you look at why is it that I would be willing to spend if I was going to die tomorrow? Or why is it that I'm more willing to go and give it to this person, if I'm going to die, thinking that they're not going to die. It's because you have this hope, you have this expectation that you're going to live for a very long life. So what is the cure for this problem? What is the cure for this problem? It's a very simple cure. It's to remember death. Remember death. To remind yourself that you don't know when you're going to die. So reflecting on death is one of the cures. Also, to remember those people who did die. Remember those people who had wealth and they thought that they were going to live for a very long time, and you probably know some of them, and they died all of a sudden. And they had no idea that it was coming. So you remember them and you think, what if I become one of them? And there's a possibility. You never know. Then you think, you know what? In that case, I may be helping my family if I give everything to my family. But I may be ruining myself because I didn't give anything in charity. I didn't fulfill my obligations. I didn't do anything. So now you're helping your family, yet you're ruining yourself. So that's something that, doesn't make sense. And reflect on the punishment of miserliness. Reflect on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about being miserly. And lastly, reflect on the fact that everyone hates a miser. Nobody likes people who are stingy. So reflect upon that. If none of these things can get you to change, then you reflect on the fact that no one would even like you if you're like that. These are certain things where if the spiritual aspect is not moving you, then some of these other examples will move you. Like anger we talked about. Imagine what you look like when you're angry. So if all the other things about anger did not work, then you could try this little trick on yourself and see if it works for you. So the same thing, reflect upon the fact that everyone will hate you if you're actually a miser. So this is one of the causes. One of the causes is to love those desires, but your assumption is that you're going to live long enough to be able to engage in those desires. Or that the other people that you love are going to live long enough to engage in those desires as well. So we have to be very careful about this. Number two, fear of poverty. Right? Fear of poverty. And Allah says in the Quran that it is shaitan, it is Satan who, continuously reminds you about poverty. That you're not going to make it, and you're not going to survive, and how you're going to support your family, and how you're going to do this, and all of that reminding you all the time. Even though you may have thousands and thousands in the bank, still that in the back of your mind you're thinking, oh no, if I spend this money, I'm going to become poor. I'm not going to have enough wealth left. What's going to happen to me? All of these things are, these are among the causes of becoming miserly. So you want to withhold that wealth thinking that you're going to be more wealthy and you're going to have more money in the bank. The cure is, as the sister mentioned, number one, trust in the rizq of Allah. Trust in the sustenance of Allah. Know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for people, and is the way that He provides for people is not the way that, it's not only through these means. Oftentimes money comes to you from means that you never expected. And oftentimes the means that you expected to get you that wealth and doesn't come through because you lose your job. Or you thought someone was going to pay you and all of a sudden they rip you off instead. Or you thought you had some possession and someone steals it and now it's gone from you. So all of these things, Allah provides sustenance, so know that. Also, think about this worldly scenario. How many children, right? How many children grew up with nothing, with no wealth? And then there were the same children next to them, they grew up with a lot of wealth. And what you see when they both grew up, one of them was poor, and the other one who grew up with nothing is wealthy. How did that happen? It didn't just happen because of somebody's intellect. It didn't just happen because of that person is, such a great, whatever it may be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them circumstances in their life so that they're actually going to be in a position where this stuff is going to be coming towards them. Which means that it's a risk, it's a sustenance that's being provided from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you think about that, when you start fearing poverty, and you start going, how am I going to survive and how am I going to make it and all of that, look at the examples of those people who had nothing. And they're not even that intelligent in the first place. And they're not even that hardworking maybe. And all of a sudden, all this wealth has come to them. And other people who are so intelligent, so smart, so this, so that, and they're sitting there unemployed. Unemployed, they can't even find a job. Because it's not in your hands 100%, and you have to realize that. You put in the effort, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the tawfiq. He gives the success or the failure, depending on His wisdom or what He wants to do with you. And lastly, number 3, love for the money itself. Now this is the worst. This is the worst cause. This is the worst characteristic that you can get in, where you start to actually love the money itself. So a person has, enough to fulfill all of his needs and beyond, way above and beyond that, yet they still want to have more and more wealth. They want to have more and more wealth because they've become attached to the wealth, the actual money itself. So it's something that they enjoy. Like the DuckTales, Scrooge McDuck, counting his money and swimming through the little thing and all. Exactly the same thing. They become so addicted to looking at it and watching it and looking at how it looks and the way that it shines and all of these things. This is a person who's completely in love with money. They're in love with the actual thing itself, even though, and it says, even though you realize that wealth is just a medium of exchange, but now you fall in love with the actual object. So you feel good and you feel comfortable. When your wallet is fat in your pocket, feeling comfortable. When it's skinny and you take it out or something, you're feeling uncomfortable. There's no cash in there. There's no money in there. You're touching it, you're feeling good. You're feeling comfortable. And it says, this is even more dangerous in old age. So people who are in their advanced in their age, it's even more dangerous because they know that they don't have as much time to live. They know for sure. You never know for sure how long you're going to live, right? But you know for sure that you're coming near the end. And people who are near the end and they still have this addiction, Imam Ghazali says, it's even more dangerous for them because they're not getting the lesson yet. They're getting closer and closer to death, yet they're becoming more and more addicted to this wealth. So the cure is to do 2 things. Number 1, to reflect on the function of wealth. What's the point of the wealth in itself? It's a medium of exchange. It's just a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself. You can't do anything with it. If there was hyperinflation in an economy, your wealth would become completely useless. Like what happened in Zimbabwe about 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, happened in Zimbabwe. What happened? Literally, I was watching the news and every single day, all of a sudden, the currency of Zimbabwe was in hyperinflation. So they said now, what used to be 1, right? In order to buy you could have bought a loaf of bread, for example, for 10, 20, 50 of these, whatever currency that they had. He said now, it's at 50,000. 50,000 of these things can buy you that same loaf of bread. Literally the next day I check, he says it's just gone up to 100,000. The next day it went up to like 1 million. And the next day it went up to 10 million. I'm thinking, imagine people who have stores and stores of all. Imagine you were a millionaire in Zimbabwe. All of a sudden, you became like a dollar heir. You became nothing. You don't own anything. The millions that you had in the bank now are completely useless. You can't even buy a loaf of bread with all the millions that you possess. It's just a medium of exchange, and this can happen. Imagine if you were living in there and there was a millionaire, or let's say there was a billionaire living in Zimbabwe. Right? Probably can't even buy a computer with all the wealth that he had. Hyperinflation destroyed the entire economy. This is just who heard of this, by the way? Some of you are following this, right? This is exactly the same thing that just happened very recently. Same thing happened in Germany after World War. Same thing. A lot of people lost everything. So we don't realize that the function of wealth is simply a means of exchange. It's not something that you get addicted to in and of itself. And the second cure is to make sure that you invest in it for the next life. So it's an investment. If you love your wealth and you want it to grow, what do? You invest it. But if you really want it to grow and you want a guaranteed growth, you invest it in the next life. Because when you invest it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it can never be taken away from you. So miserliness, the last point on this is, miserliness can blind you. Okay? It can blind you, or it can at least blur your vision. So the real cure is to start spending. And Imam Ghazali makes an interesting point. He says, even if you're not spending for the sake of Allah, even if you're not sincerely spending for the sake of Allah, in the beginning, do this as a habit and an exercise that you start spending. Spend something. Because you're so used to holding, you need to start changing that and combating it with the opposite. Like we talked about in the first class. When there's a disease of the heart, and you're afflicted by some calamity, you need to start balancing it with the opposite. So start giving in charity, or start spending on other people. Start going, if you have a problem, right? In giving charity, for example. Every place you go, anywhere someone asks me, I'm going to give something. When somebody asks me, I need some type of charity, I'm going to give something. You have a problem with, not wanting to pay the bill when you go with your friends. And everyone else is ready to pay the bill, and you're the only one, and it's in your culture. American culture, everyone splits the bill across the board. That's fine. Other cultures, you rush to, pay the bill. Other cultures, you fight and you punch the other guy just to make sure that you're going to pay the bill, right? There's different cultures. The thing is, if you're one of those people and you're saying, you know what, I'm just hoping that someone else shows me hospitality, but it's in your culture where you're supposed to be showing hospitality as well. You get yourself accustomed to doing that. You force yourself, even if you don't feel like it, you make yourself do it so that you start getting into the habit. Even if you don't feel like it, it's like exercise again. Even if you don't feel like it, you force yourself, somehow I'm going to do something, I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to move around or whatever it may be. So it's something that's really important to start getting this addiction away from yourself. Okay, this is very, very important. Inshallah. So more cures for miserliness and greed. I think now is a good time to take a break, inshallah. Right? So we'll take I need some water too. We'll take a 10-minute break, inshallah, and we'll resume at 12:12, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. Okay, example is, basic example is making wudu. So prayer, you have to pray. Removing filth from your body is a requirement. So for example, another example, let's say, going to Hajj, right? Going for Hajj, making sure that the path to Hajj is safe. That you're not going to get killed or you're not going to get robbed or something like that. So there was a period of time in history where in India and in Spain, at least two places it's been documented, where Muslims stopped going for Hajj because they said the path was very dangerous. Now in India, they didn't have a very good justification. In Spain, they had more of a justification. So their thing was, if you travel from Spain all the way to Mecca, you're going by boat and you're going by land. The thing is, there was a period of time where it became so dangerous because there was so many bandits along the road that you're most likely, if you're traveling from Spain, you're most likely going to get killed. Right? So the scholars of Spain at that time, they actually gave a fatwa which says you're not obligated if you live in this area to go for Hajj until safety is there. So restoring safety on the path is wajib itself. Is a requirement itself. So that's one of the examples, right? Exactly. So if you had enough, hiring security guard or something like that to go would be a prerequisite. Exactly. And you have to pay a lot for that. That's why even some scholars like Ibn Rushd, he wrote an entire book of fiqh, and he didn't write Kitab al-Hajj. He didn't write the chapter of Hajj until 20 years later. Because he said, what's the point of writing Hajj if no one can go for Hajj? It shows you what the situation. We'll learn more about that in Islamic history. It was not all, rosy. It was not all rosy picture throughout Islamic history. Yes. The which one? Oh, okay. You want to know the quote that was revealed? It's in the notes. It's all in the notes. 59:9. Chapter 59, verse 9. Yeah. So in terms of, okay, so the question is, how do you know you're doing it for the sake of Allah if you're doing it for the sake of reward in the next life, for example? This is a very common question, and it's been addressed by scholars. So basically, in summary, the answer is that if you're doing something for the reward in the next life, right, you're doing it because of your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, technically, it's being done for the sake of Allah. So some people do things for different reasons. Imam Nawawi gives an explanation. He says, some people do it for the sake of the reward in the next life. Some people do it because they love Allah. Some people do it because they fear the punishment of Allah, right? And some people do it because the fourth category he gives is kind of like love of Allah, but they have so much awe of Allah that they would do it anyways. So he says that the highest status, this is his opinion, scholars have differed. His opinion is the highest status is, even if you knew you were going to be punished and you were not going to make it to Jannah, you would still do it anyways. Because of your awe and your awe and your servitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You'd say, this is still something that I owe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, that's the highest level. He said, the lowest level is to do it for the sake of reward and for the sake of getting paradise. That's the lowest level of doing things, yet it still falls in the category of doing it for the sake of Allah. Because the desires that you have are limited to this life. And once you have desires to get something outside of this life, you're doing it based upon your iman. So therefore, it's still being done for the sake of Allah. Now, how do you know you're doing something for the sake of Allah in your own life? Basically, think about, kind of like we mentioned before, imagine nobody's watching you, nobody knew about it, there was no other incentives or whatever, would you still do it? If all of that was removed, all those variables are removed, would you still do the actual act or not? That's when you know it would be done for the sake of Allah. So you can test yourself a few times and see whether you're doing it this way, and then you can find out whether or not it's sincerely for the sake of Allah or not. That's one way. It's just one way. The lowest level, yeah. You're right, sorry. Doing it to avoid the punishment is a lower level than that, and then one level above that is doing it for reward. Jazakumullah khair.
That opinion sounds very similar, and I think one of the companions said it, that if you saw hellfire, you wouldn't worship Allah anymore, and if you saw paradise, you wouldn't increase it.
Probably that's what he based it on. Probably. Okay, yes.
My question is, what if you see something like in somebody you love, one of these diseases, and when you advise them, they don't listen. They don't want to listen. What is the thing that done for men? Do you keep them doing it, or you just get out and
Okay.
let
Just-
them figure it out themselves? But by the time
So the question, yeah.
even you see the disease
You see the disease in somebody else that's close to you, and you're advising them. Just a reminder again. This is like fifth reminder though. Primarily, we want to focus only on ourselves in this class. So this is the number one thing. If you're seeing it though after you have focused on yourself, and you've really checked yourself, and you made sure that you're taking care of yourself. It's just, remember, it's like the airplane, right? Those of you who travel on an airplane, and they say in the event of an emergency, oxygen mask will fall down, right? And what do they say? Make sure you put your own on before helping other people. That's just a reminder. Make sure you put your own oxygen mask on and fix yourself before helping other people. If you notice it in somebody else and they're refusing to change, they're refusing to accept this advice, and you know clearly that they have this problem, and your advice is not working, then you could do one thing. One, you could advise them in a different way. Number two, you can have somebody else advise them on your behalf, someone who they're more likely to listen to. Right? Number three, if none of those things work, you make dua for them. And number four, you take a break, and then you try to advise them later on, because certain circumstances in their life may change them. Sometimes people need certain changes in their life. They need to be shaken up, some event needs to happen in their life for them to start considering different things. So it doesn't mean you give up 100%, but you wait a while, make dua for them, and then you advise them again when some circumstances have changed. This is, to the extent, I think this is pretty much what you can do. Even if it's your own children. If they are older, and they've reached the age of maturity, what else can you do? Even if they reach that level, because you have levels of responsibility. As I think it was a statement of Ali or one of the companions. It says until the age of 7, you're going to be taking care of them. Until 7 to 14, you're going to befriend them and all of that. Once they reach beyond that stage, when they're independent, now it's like speaking to anybody else, right? Even though you're supposed to have some level of authority over them, if they don't respect that authority, it's just like dealing with somebody else. You have more responsibility to advise them, but you don't have control over them. You don't have control over them. So you just simply give them advice, you make da'wah towards them. See, before they're mature and independent, you are, what's the right word for it? Not just responsible, accountable, you're shaping them, right? You're dictating, in a nicer way, you're dictating what they're going to be doing and what they're not going to be doing. Once they reach beyond that, now you're making da'wah with them. You're calling them to the right path the same way that you would be calling anyone else, but of course with more love, with more care, with more concern, and with all of these things. That's the way it is. Because they're independent. Allah has given freedom to everyone to think whatever they want and do whatever they want in a limited fashion. So that's all you can do. And make dua, of course. Make dua, of course, yes.
We believe in the qadr, right? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already decided how much money somebody is going to get.
Yes.
So is there a hadith of Qudsi that says that if you're pleased with what Allah has given you and then your body is rested and you're happy, Allah is pleased with you and everything is good, and if you're not pleased with it, then and you work like a dog, you will still get what was decided.
If you what? Like a dog, you said?
You will work like a dog to try to get whatever something. You want to get more money, but you just kill yourself trying to do it. But you will still get what has been decided.
I mean, the meaning seems correct, but I don't remember the hadith. I don't recall it. Sure. Yeah, well, see, the needs are also going to be defined in the culture that you live as well. So needs meaning like what do you absolutely, is education, is higher education really an absolute need? So it depends on where you live, and it depends on your culture and custom. It's not a necessity at the level of like darura, but people see it as being more important than others, and it has to do with class as well. When I was talking about needs here, needs meaning your essential needs, outside of class. Right? So usually people, when they say that, you know what, I'm in need, I'm in a bad situation, what they mean is, I want to retain my standard of life according to the class that I'm in, like you said, upper middle class. So if they, for example, if they can't afford a certain thing, they feel that they're in need. Whereas in reality, they're going to survive just fine, although they're going to be transferred down to a different class. So the definition of need is not maintaining yourself in a certain class that you are, but rather maintaining your need in terms of your need to survive and live a decent living without being unhealthy and being able to function and all of these things. Okay? Okay. Yeah.
There's some wealth that came via haram means.
Yes.
And you're not, let's say somebody fears giving that, thinking that, maybe this money is like contaminated, maybe no good can come from it, even by giving charity. What's the permissible way of dealing with that?
Okay, so if you have wealth that's come from haram means, gambling or something like that, your obligation is to give away all of that in charity. In charity. That's your obligation, is to give all of it away. So if you've received it from a means that can be restored, like you robbed a bank, right? You have to give it back to the bank. Or you stole it from somebody, you have to give it back to that person. If you can't give it back to that person because it's a result of drug dealing or something like that, and it's the amount of money that actually came from the haram source. You bought a whole package, you sold a package of 50% drugs and 50% halal stuff, coffee or something like that, right? So you sold that package, the amount that came from the haram thing, you have to give all of that away in charity. The ruling is you have to give it in charity, whether it's barakah or not. It depends to what extent it was earned. So when you talk about, for example, interest money, let's say you loan someone and you took interest on it. The capital itself may not be the forbidden part, it's the interest itself that needs to be given away. So it depends on the proportion of the thing that you've earned, depending on how much you're going to give away. That's what determines. There's no reward at all. So this is the thing. A lot of people say, if I'm going to get a lottery ticket, and if I win the lottery, I'm going to give 99% of it to charity, and I'm just going to keep a little bit. Or I've heard actually someone say, I'm going to give 100% to charity, but it's for the sake of Allah. I want the Muslim community in Southern California to, be better off or something like that. I said, do I at least get a reward for my intention of helping the Muslim community? No, because you did it through the wrong means. All right, so it's not allowed. The one weird case I had, was it you? Maybe it was you. Someone gave you a lottery ticket. Was it you? No. Somebody else. Someone gave them their non-Muslim family, I think, gave them a lottery ticket just for the heck of it, right? He said, "Do I throw it away, or do I actually look at the numbers?" That was a difficult question, right? Do you look at the numbers, or do you give it away, or whatever it is? So, anyways. You want to know the answer to that? I consulted with Sheikh Faqih, and we came up with the thing that you should, if you have time or whatever, you look at the numbers, and if you win, you give it all in charity with no expectation of reward, but at least you did help the community. So you helped, but you didn't get any reward for helping. That's it. Yeah.
Actually, there's a real situation, although you mentioned the classes for personal improvement. I mean, some of Muslim millionaire believers do not take riba when you put your money in outside the country, in the Western society. But what happens is a result, all these charities, they go and they take this money.
All the charities?
Yes. When, for example, they have $1 million, this is real documents, and they put one of Western society banks or a business. When they get interest, you will not take the interest. Leave the interest for the bank, and the bank give to the church, and the church use the diamond. So in this situation, this is a real example for the documentary. So we see, although they do something, they try to stick in the principle, but in the consequences, that is some bad.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So the churches take all the interest money that's remaining.
From many Muslim money, and they spend
In Muslim money?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That Muslims leave in the bank?
Yes, because Muslim, what they do.
What do they give it back to the bank? Or what?
What they say for the bank, this is not, I'm not going to take the interest.
Okay.
So whatever you do with the interest.
Yeah.
These people, they know ahead of
See,
time.
yeah, that's a long thing. I tell you, if there's enough time and there's no other questions, I can answer this one in detail.
Oh.
Inshallah. Are there any other questions? People, yeah.
Just to comment on what the brother was just saying about not getting any reward for the haram that he's spending.
Yes.
You may get reward for leaving an act that was haram, like getting more money and then leaving it, just for the sake of abandoning that.
Perhaps, but because it's already been acquired in a unlawful way, it's something that you just need to get rid of, basically. Yeah, you'll get a reward for getting rid of it. So Karosh, she's answering your thing. Is you might get a reward for dumping the money, just for getting rid of it, but not get a reward for what you're giving. In terms of, you're not getting a charity reward, but you get a reward for avoiding sin. So you're dumping it, so you can get. So you might get a reward for dumping it, basically. Yeah. Yeah, for abandoning. For abandoning the sin and staying away from it. So that will be a reward for that. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Just very into the question you mentioned about the companions that were dying and saying they would want to come next. Is there any indication as to whether they were doing this in what level of, for the sake of the moment, they were doing it, whether it was referencing others themselves or hoping for reward?
Yeah, it says, well, it's a sign of love for their brother. So it's clearly that, why would somebody do something like this? It's because they love that person. Now, why do they love that person? These were not family members, right? These were people who are not even from the same tribe. But the fact that they were Muslim, they had such a love for their Muslim brother, Muslim sister, they were willing to do something like that, that means it's done for the sake of Allah. So brotherhood, loving that person for the sake of Allah, it resulted in them preferring that person over themselves. This has become like a fiqh session, basically. Yeah. Let me tell you very briefly on life insurance. Life. So majority of scholars who have permitted insurance have not permitted life insurance. Okay, in terms of my own stance, I'm undecided. So I've heard there are some scholars who allow it. So I'm undecided, but I feel that generally the people who take life insurance belong to which class? You don't find poor people taking out life insurance because they don't have money to pay in, right? So the thing is, when we're talking about life insurance, my perception is the real point of life insurance is not to just take care of your family. The real point of life insurance is to maintain your standard of living in the case of an emergency. That's what conclusion that I've come to. And is that a necessity? It's not a necessity in life. Now there are some scholars who allowed it not based on necessity, and that's like a very complex issue, which we're going to cover next quarter. We will be covering insurance and financial transactions next quarter in Islamic law, second Islamic law class. So.
What about employers who say, not just if they don't something that they employ employees and then they don't pay the employees their salary, and then after conveying like all this study in this Quran, economically that's not permissible, but they still choose to, when they have the money and they have the money available to pay you, but choose to sustain the company rather than paying what their
Right. So Muslims who have money and they're not paying their employees, what should be done? We need a Umar ibn al-Khattab. That's what we need. Give them a stick. No, they should be sued. To be very honest, they should be taken either to small claims court or they should be sued. And no one should stop and say, well, it's my Muslim brother, and no, he's not paying you, and he has an obligation to pay you. Take him to court. That's the best thing. It's the only way some people are going to learn. So that's why it's very important to make sure you're a properly documented worker, and everything is on the books and everything is being written, because people do some shady stuff. So that's the best thing, is to take them to account. Yeah, inshallah. Okay. All right. So we'll leave your question, inshallah, for next quarter. Inshallah, next quarter. Okay. So any other questions? As you can see, probably. How many of you are keeping up with the exams for this class? As you can see, it's very difficult to test you theoretically on something like this. This is more like advice, things that you need to just do in your own life. So the test is there to just kind of understand that you are going through the material, you are kind of understanding it, but at the same time understand that the test doesn't really do much until you actually do these things and apply these things in your own life, and no one can test them. We can't, if you pass the test, it doesn't mean that, okay, now you're not a miser, or you're a generous person, right? And if you fail the test, it doesn't mean that you're a miser, or that you're not a generous person. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that this is a very practical class. So the classes this quarter happen to be the 3 easiest classes for the first year of CIS. The next quarter in September, so be prepared, are going to be the 3 most difficult classes. Okay, they're going to be 3 most difficult classes. So as you saw, like Sirah was a little bit more difficult than the life of the Prophet was a little bit more difficult than the prophetic wisdom class. Islamic law for quite a few people was more difficult than the other 2 classes. So the next quarter is going to be the 2 most difficult classes. Islamic history is going to be very difficult, and Islamic law too is going to be even more difficult than that. And the theology is going to be kind of in the medium. So just be prepared, get ready for that, free up some time if you're going to be taking next quarter, and make dua. I have 3 months to prepare for those classes, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to benefit practically from these things and to implement these things in our lives. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. I bought it before I came here.
This morning.
I bought it this morning.
Like order bala ke de do.
No, we're going to go to Costco afterwards. So we'll be fine, inshallah.
I'm really sorry, but I didn't mean to put it.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm just